So let's take a look at this little unit here, which is a 2 SATA adapter or SATA adapter for the M.2 Wi-Fi or wireless card, so you can connect 2 SATA hard drives to that little M.2 slot. Let's have a look at what we actually get here in the box, or not the box, bag rather. We of course get the little adapter here, and this is going in a small form factor computer that I am repurposing. It is an Acer computer that only has like 2 SATA plugs on the motherboard, and I have a case that can hold up to 4 hard drives, so this will come in handy, and I just plan to use that for a little small server here around the house. But anyways, this is what you get, of course, this little controller / adapter card here. So 2 SATA plugs, and of course all depending on your specific motherboard, whether if it's PCI Express 1, 2 or 3 will determine the speed. I believe the one I have is only PCI Express Gen 2 times 1, so we've not really been able to like run full speed SSDs on these SATA controllers or these SATA here, because theoretically it can handle up to 500 megabytes per second throughput through the little M.2 slot. And of course, as SSD can like handle up to 550 megabytes per second. But anyways, there's a little heatsink on the little controller on board, which is nice. I've seen other online that does not have a heatsink on there. Supposedly, it does get a little bit hot, the controller, so definitely a good idea to have a heatsink on there, or put one on if you don't have one on your little device there, or at least make sure it does have plenty of airflow. Other than that, you have a few components here, and on the back side, a few more surface mounted components. Doesn't seem to be soldered all that well actually. I would probably have soldered it a little bit more if it was me that made these, but I'm sure it's fine enough as long as you don't put any like excessive force on these 2 plugs here. Should be fine enough, but would have been nice to see it like soldered a little bit more here towards the outer pins here. You can see on the board, not really soldered all that well, but this doesn't support M.2 NVMe SSD slots. So this is only for PCI Express Wi-Fi / Bluetooth cards on your motherboard. You can also get these for like M.2 NVMe SSD slots. You can actually get more SATA ports on those because they have higher bandwidth and so on. But yeah, this would be fine for my little project here. The first impressions, definitely nice. I would like to see the heatsink in another orientation, so it will like blow air over this card here. It will kind of cool it a little bit, but I don't think it's a big issue. And like I said, it would have been nice to see those pins there, like connecting the plugs, be soldered a little bit better. Minor gripes, and we also get a screw included. That's kind of nice actually. These are very easy to lose, so if you don't already have a card installed in your motherboard, nice little thing that it's included. And it's going into this small computer that I have recently built, repurposed like I said, an old Acer computer. So it's an Intel i5 4-core CPU, 7th generation, and put it in this small case here. Modified it a little bit so I can use that small form factor power supply that it came with. So kind of mounted it up here. This case is supposed to handle up to a micro ATX and still have an ATX power supply. This is a DTX motherboard, so definitely not room for a full ATX power supply. But yeah, I could mount this smaller power supply up here just fine. And I have 2 drives here on the side as well. You can see those are not connected because I do not have enough SATA connections on the motherboard. I don't know if you can actually see in here, but there is only 2 SATA connectors on the motherboard. But over here do have a Wi-Fi / Bluetooth card. So this one I'm going to repurpose as hopefully 2 SATA ports, so I can hook up 4 drives to this case here. Find the screwdriver here and remove the Wi-Fi card. I do apologize, you cannot really see this because of the angle, but let me just remove the card here. So this is of course the Wi-Fi / Bluetooth card is going to replace. You can see it does have exactly the same plugs here underneath, and that's of course very important if you want to use the SATA controller there. It is of course a little bit higher, so make sure it doesn't bump into anything. For instance, on my motherboard, I have the PCI Express x16 slot right here, and it kind of gets a little bit away of my graphics card, so I'm kind of curious to see if I can still have a graphics card in here. And at the same time, this controller, these SATA plugs, so let's just plug them in and see how well it will actually sit. Yeah, it is actually pretty flushed with the PCI Express slot, but of course once you start using the plugs, kind of stick out a little bit, so I'm not really sure I can actually have my graphics card in there, which is a little bit annoying, but is a trade-off. The CPU in here does have a graphics card, and I'm only really going to use this as a media server, so I don't really need a graphics card really, other than the built-in Intel one. I'm just going to repurpose the screw that already was attached to my motherboard, because I know that will work. And as you can see here, nicely mounted inside the motherboard. But of course, depending on your specific motherboard, it can kind of get a little bit in the way. You can of course get 90-degree angle plugs, and I do have some of those. Let me just try and see actually if I can get my graphics card and use those 90-degree plugs. 90-degree plugs can turn both ways, so this one is actually the wrong way in towards like the PCI Express slot. So yeah, can't really use that. And also if you have two 90-degree plugs, you cannot really use them at the same time because they will kind of interfere with each other. So only really use 90-degree plugs on one or the other one here. And of course, of all of my 90-degree plugs, I don't have one that is in the right orientation. So never mind. You can of course also use straight plugs, which is probably what I'm going to do in this specific build here. You can see there, once you actually start plugging something in, it will, like I said, kind of interfere if you have like a graphics card or whatever in there that is taking up the full length of that PCI Express x16 slot. So even like a small graphics card like this one here still takes, of course, a little bit of room here. This is only like one slot card, but still, I think it will interfere with that SATA plug. Let's just try actually. So I don't know really if you can see this on camera, but definitely is interfering with the first plug here. I could just use the other plug if I don't want to use both of them, but that kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. So it's either using SATA controllers here or using this specific graphics card, or you can get like a smaller graphics card that doesn't really take up the full length of the PCI Express x16 slot. I'll probably just throw an NVMe SSD in there at some point. So yeah, definitely not really ideal for a graphics card in this specific motherboard. So you can see the two SATA plugs or cables plugged into the little adapter here, routing all the way here through the case to the other side, where I've hooked up like both power and of course data to both of these two small hard drives here. So next step of course is to turn this thing on here and actually see if it will detect these drives. And connected to power, you can see here we do have a few status LEDs. I guess this just tells you that they're plugged in. There's like one LED for each of the SATA ports here, or SATA connectors. So the two LEDs that I showed you before actually works as status LEDs. So you can see when I'm actually using the drives, they will kind of flash. Of course, one LED for each of the SATA ports or connectors. That's a nifty little feature. Can also be a little bit annoying actually, but it's nice to see that there's actually data going to and off from the two drives connected to this little controller here. So I have been using the drives for quite some time now. I'm kind of building my array in Unraid, so it's constantly reading or writing to the drives. Let's just check a little controller and see what kind of temperatures we actually get. And you can see just kind of around the 30 degrees Celsius, which isn't really all that bad. Definitely doesn't get too hot. But this little heatsink also, I think, helps a little bit. It's not really all that hot either when I touch it with my finger. So yeah, actually it works quite well. I'm surprised or impressed by this little device. Doesn't really cost all that much really. And if you just want to repurpose an old computer like this and want to connect more drives to that computer, if you want to use it as a server, you don't really need to use Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth card. So it's nice to be able to repurpose that plug or that M.2 form factor there. You could of course also just connect some SATA plugs or controllers to the PCI Express ports, either 6x16 slot or the x1 here. But currently I have a LAN adapter in the x1 slot, and I kind of want to use the x16 slot maybe for an SSD sometimes in the future. But now, definitely very happy with this little SATA controller adapter. And of course, I will share some affiliate link down in the description below if you're interested in getting something like this. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. Until next time, take care.